I didn't kill Arcturus Capital. Let's get that straight right out of the gate. I didn't plant a virus, I didn't delete the database, and I certainly didn't short the stock. I just stood back, folded my arms, and let gravity do its job. When you build a skyscraper on a foundation of quicksand and daddy's money, you don't need a demolition crew, you just need time. But if you want to know exactly how a single USB drive weighing less than an ounce managed to crush a $300 million deal and turn a hedge fund manager into a whimpering pile of designer fabric, pull up a chair. You might want to grab a drink, too. Preferably something strong, because the level of corporate stupidity I'm about to describe is enough to give you a contact hangover. By the way, if you enjoy stories about competent women destroying incompetent net babies with nothing but fine print and patience, go ahead and hit subscribe and maybe drop a like. It fuels my cold, algorithmic heart to know I'm not screaming into the void. Okay, back to the carnage. To understand the crash, you have to understand the engine. I'm Naomi. For 5 years, I was the lead algorithm architect at Arcturus. That's a fancy title for the person who actually knows how the money is made. People think high-frequency trading is about shouting on phones or analyzing charts. It's not. It's about latency. It's about being a microsecond faster than the guy in the next tower. I built the Arcturus engine from scratch. It wasn't just code to me, it was a symphony of logic. It was beautiful. It whispered profits while the rest of the market was still screaming. It outperformed the S&P 5 years straight, not because of luck, but because I optimized the hell out of the execution layer. I lived in that code. I breathed in C++ and exhaled alpha. But here's the thing about building something that valuable, you have to protect it. Not from hackers, I had firewalls for that. You have to protect it from the suits. 5 years ago, when I was hired, Arcturus was a boutique firm with more ambition than sense. It needed me more than I needed them. I sat down with their then lawyer, a tired old man named Henderson who just wanted to get to his golf game, and I redlined my employment contract. I added a clause. Appendix D, Section 4, Paragraph 2. It was buried under a mountain of standard intellectual property jargon. It stated, in very boring, very specific legal English, that while the company owned the code I wrote during the normal course of business, the core architecture and its underlying source logic would revert to my personal ownership if the firm ever altered the fundamental security protocols without my express written consent. Henderson didn't read it. He just saw that I wasn't asking for more equity, stamped it, and went to the country club. That signature was the safety pin on the grenade I carried in my pocket for half a decade. Then came the changing of the guard. Founder retired to a private island to count his millions, and in walked his son. Bryce Langford Jr. Bryce was a walking, talking stereotype of finance bro culture. He was 32, wore suits that cost more than my car, and had a smile that looked like it was purchased from a catalog. He didn't know the difference between a server rack and a wine rack. He walked into the office on his first day with the energy of a golden retriever who had just done a line of coke. He looked around the trading floor, saw the quiet efficiency, and decided it wasn't disruptive enough. We need to shake things up, Naomi, he told me during our first one-on-one. He was sitting on the edge of my desk, uninvited, swinging a leg clad in Italian leather. The engine, it's good, but it's a black box. We need to open it up. Pivot to AI, blockchain, quantum, you know? I stared at him. He was throwing buzzwords at me like confetti. The engine is performing at 18% above market benchmark, Bryce, I said, my voice flat. It's a low-latency execution model. It doesn't need blockchain. It needs to be left alone. He laughed, a hollow barking sound. That's the old way of thinking. We need to streamline. I'm bringing in some new blood. Fresh eyes. We're going to refactor the whole stack. My stomach dropped. Not because I was afraid of losing my job. I could walk into any firm on the street and get hired in 10 minutes. I felt sick because he was talking about taking a scalpel to a masterpiece he didn't understand. He didn't see the complexity. He just saw a shiny object he wanted to put his name on. Bryce, I said, very slowly, the security protocols are tightly wound into the kernel. You can't just refactor it without destabilizing the risk management layer. Don't worry your pretty little head about the risk, he said. He actually said that. Pretty little head. I've got a guy, Trevor. He was a wizard at Crypto Douche LLC or whatever. He's going to lead the modernization project. You'll report to him. He hopped off my desk and winked. Get on board, Naomi. The train is leaving the station. He was right. The train was leaving. He just didn't realize he had severed the brake lines before he blew the whistle. I watched him walk away, high-fiving a junior trader, and I felt a cold, calm resolve settle over me. He didn't ask what powered the engine. He didn't ask about the load-bearing walls of the system. He just wanted to rename the building. I turned back to my monitor. I opened a private folder, encrypted with a key only I possessed. Inside was a scanned PDF of my contract. I scrolled down to Appendix D. I read the words again. Fundamental security protocols. Okay, Bryce, I whispered to the empty air of my office. You want to drive? Here are the keys, but you better hope you don't crash because I own the road. I started backing up my logs that afternoon, every email, every commit history. Every Slack message where Bryce authorized something stupid. I wasn't paranoid, I was preparing for the autopsy. The air in the office had changed. It smelled less like ozone and money, more like cheap cologne and desperation. The storm wasn't coming, it was already here, wearing a three-piece suit and asking for admin access. If Bryce was the arsonist, Trevor was the guy pouring gasoline on the floor thinking it was cleaning fluid. Bryce introduced him the following Monday at an all-hands meeting. Trevor looked like he had been manufactured in a lab funded by frantic frat boys. He wore a vest over a t-shirt, had hair that defied physics, and used the word synergy 3 times in the first minute of his introduction. "We're going to desilo the data," Trevor announced, pacing the stage like he was giving a TED talk to an audience of golden retrievers. Arcturus has been running on legacy mindsets. We're going to migrate the entire core logic to a cloud-native, open architecture environment. We're going to move fast and break things. I sat in the back row, sipping my lukewarm coffee, thinking, "You break things in a hedge fund, Trevor, and the SEC breaks your kneecaps." But I stayed silent. I was officially lead legacy consultant now, a demotion that came with the same salary but zero authority. It was a humiliation ritual, intended to make me quit so they wouldn't have to pay severance. Bryce wanted me gone, but he was too cowardly to fire the woman who built the machine. He wanted me to rage quit. He underestimated my capacity for spite. The first clash happened 2 days later. Trevor marched into my office, which had been relocated from the corner to a windowless box near the restrooms, without knocking. "Naomi," he said, clapping his hands together, "I need the root keys to the dev environment. Me and the boys are setting up the new repository, and we keep hitting a permission wall." "That's because it's a segmented network, Trevor," I said, not looking up from my screen. "It's air-gapped for a reason. That's where the live trading algorithms live. If you introduce a bug there, we lose real money. Millions, in seconds. Yeah, guardrails, I get it." He waved a hand dismissively. "But we need full access to refactor the security modules. Bryce wants single sign-on for everyone. It's too much friction right now." I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Single sign-on for the core trading engine. We want to let interns access the algo with the same password they use for their email. It's about velocity, Naomi. Friction kills innovation. Incompetence kills liquidity, Trevor," I shot back. "I can't give you root access. Compliance Policy Section 9. Only the chief architect can authorize changes to the security architecture. And since you're the director of innovation and not the architect, you don't get the keys." Trevor's face turned a blotchy shade of pink. "I don't think you understand the hierarchy here. Bryce put me in charge. Then have Bryce send me a signed order overriding the compliance protocol," I said, finally turning to face him. "Put it in writing. Explicitly state that you are bypassing the established security architecture against the advice of the lead developer." Trevor sneered. "You're just trying to hoard information. You're terrified we're going to find out your genius code is just a bunch of if-then statements. Get the signature, Trevor." He stormed out. I knew what was coming. They wouldn't sign it. Signing it created a paper trail of liability. Instead, they would try to go around me. They would try to brute force the permissions or bully the junior IT staff. I opened my encrypted log file. Date: October 14th. Vent: Trevor requested removal of air gap and implementation of insecure auth protocols. Action: denied based on Compliance Policy 9. Note: they are actively seeking to alter the fundamental security protocols. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I felt like a seismologist watching the needles start to quiver before the big one. They were poking the bear. They were scratching at the door of Appendix D. Later that afternoon, I saw the IT manager, a nervous kid named Kevin, coming out of Bryce's office looking pale. I intercepted him by the water cooler. "Kevin," I said softly. He jumped. "Hey, Naomi, just grabbing water. What did they ask you to do?" He looked around, checking for Trevor. They want me to reset the admin privileges on the main server. They want me to create a backdoor admin account for Trevor. Did you do it?" "Not yet," I told them. I need a ticket for that. It takes 24 hours. "Good man," I said. "Kevin, listen to me. Whatever you do, document it. Email them confirming the request. Forward the replies to your personal email. Do not go to jail for these idiots." He nodded, terrified. Is it bad?" "It's catastrophic," I said. "But don't worry, just delay them. I'm handling it." I wasn't handling it in the way he thought. I wasn't saving the ship. I was checking the lifeboats. I spent the rest of the week auditing my own code, ensuring that the timestamp on my original source files was indisputable. I verified the Git history. I made sure that every line of code I wrote before Bryce arrived was tagged and hashed. They were treating the firm like a sandbox, throwing sand everywhere, oblivious to the fact that they were blinding themselves. I sat in my windowless office, the hum of the servers vibrating through the floor, and waited. I was a spider in the center of a web they were trying to sweep away, but they didn't realize the web was structural. Tear it down and the roof comes with it. It started with a stutter. Not a literal noise, but a financial one. The Arcturus engine, which usually executed trades with the smooth, lethal precision of a sniper, began to miss. Trevor and his Tiger team of developers, 3 guys he poached from a failing crypto exchange, had managed to deploy a patch. They bypassed Kevin in IT by threatening to fire him, and they pushed code directly to the production environment on a Tuesday morning. Rule number 1 of algo trading: you never deploy on a Tuesday morning when the market is opening. You deploy on Friday night and spend the weekend praying. I was watching the real-time dashboard on my second monitor. It was a habit I couldn't break. Usually, the execution latency line was a flat, green hum at the bottom of the graph. At 9:32 a.m., it spiked, just a little. A millisecond here, 2 milliseconds there. To a human, a millisecond is nothing. To the market, it's the difference between eating lunch and being lunch. The P&L profit and loss ticker, which usually ticked up in steady, rhythmic increments, started to jaggedly sway. We were losing the arbitrage spread. The engine was seeing the opportunity, but by the time Trevor's bloated, refactored code waded through the new unnecessary logic layers to pull the trigger, the price had moved. By 11 o'clock a.m., the firm was down $400,000. By 2 o'clock p.m., we were down $1.2 million. The glass walls of Bryce's office were vibrating. I could see him screaming into his phone. Trevor was pacing outside, gesturing wildly to his team, who were frantically typing on their MacBooks like they were hacking the mainframe in a bad 90s movie. At 3:30 p.m., the summons came. Bryce's assistant, a woman who looked like she aged 5 years in the last 5 weeks, appeared at my door. "They need you in the conference room." Now, I walked in slowly. The air in the room smelled of stale coffee and fear. Bryce was sweating through his bespoke shirt. Trevor looked like he wanted to vomit. "Naomi," Bryce barked, not even looking at me. "Fix it." "Fix what?" I asked, taking a seat at the far end of the table. I folded my hands on the mahogany. I thought we were pivoting to the new stack. "Isn't this the disruption you wanted? Don't get cute with me." Bryce slammed his hand on the table. "The latency is through the roof. We're bleeding cash. Trevor says it's your legacy code conflicting with the new modules." I looked at Trevor. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Is that right, Trevor? My code, which hasn't been touched in 6 months, suddenly decided to conflict today? The exact day you pushed your optimization patch? Your code is spaghetti." Trevor snapped, desperate to deflect. It's not compatible with modern libraries. It's rejecting our API calls. You built it to be proprietary and hostile. I built it to be fast," I corrected, "and secure. You're trying to bolt a spoiler onto a rocket ship with duct tape, and you're surprised the aerodynamics are off. Just turn off the old security checks." Trevor yelled, "That's what's slowing it down. The system is checking credentials every microsecond because of your paranoia. If we disable the internal handshake, we regain the speed." The room went silent. Bryce looked at Trevor, then at me. "Can we do that, can you?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Technically, yes, you can strip out the internal verification protocols. It would act like a turbo boost. For about 10 minutes. Then do it," Bryce ordered. "I won't," I said. "This is insubordination." Bryce roared, "No, it's risk management. If you remove those protocols, you leave the engine open to injection attacks." And more importantly, I paused, weighing the words, "You fundamentally alter the architecture of the system." "I don't care about the architecture. I care about the P&L. Bryce stood up, his face red. "Trevor, do you know how to disable it?" Trevor hesitated. I think so, but I need the master encryption key. Naomi has it." Bryce turned his glare on me. "Give him the key, Naomi." "No, you're fired if you don't. If you fire me, I walk out with the knowledge of where the bodies are buried. And if you force that change, you're on your own." Bryce grit his teeth. "Give him the key." I stood up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, silver USB drive, not the important one, just a dummy drive with some config files. "This isn't the key," I said, "but it contains the documentation on why you shouldn't do this. If you want to ruin this company, you'll have to figure out how to break the lock yourself. I'm not handing you the crowbar." I walked out. They didn't fire me. They were too scared. But I knew what they were going to do. They were desperate. Desperation makes people stupid. They were going to try to crack the security shell themselves. They were going to try to bypass the fundamental security protocols. I went back to my desk and opened my monitoring suite. I wasn't watching the market anymore. I was watching the system logs. I was watching for the specific signature of a forced entry. They were about to rewrite the locks on my house. They didn't realize that the moment they did, the deed to the house would legally transfer to me. I watched the screen. 4:15 p.m. The market was closed, but the engineers were still typing. The clean rewrite was failing quietly, drowning in errors. They were about to do something loud to fix it. The break-in didn't happen with a bang. There were no sirens, no shattered glass. It happened with a line of text on a terminal window at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday. I had stayed late, ostensibly to monitor the transition, but really, I was holding a vigil. I knew they were working on the back end. I could see the server load spiking as Trevor and his goons threw brute force scripts against the internal firewalls. They were trying to strip out the authentication layer, the internal handshake I had mentioned. It was the digital equivalent of removing the load-bearing beams to make the living room look bigger. I had a script running on my local machine, a simple listener loop designed to ping the core security kernel every 10 seconds. Ping, secure, ping, secure, ping, secure, then the text changed color. Red, ping, alert, kernel integrity compromised, security protocol for bypassed, unauthorized writes detected in root directory. They did it, they actually did it. To fix their latency issues, they had disabled the core security checks. They had altered the fundamental security protocols without the express written consent of the lead algorithm architect. I sat back in my chair. The office was dark, save for the glow of my monitors and the light spilling out from under Bryce's door down the hall. I could hear muffled cheering. They were celebrating. They thought they had fixed the engine. They thought they had unclogged the pipe. They didn't realize they had just cut the main line. I took a screenshot. I saved the system logs. I exported the timestamp diff files showing exactly what code was changed and who changed it. User, Trevor admin override. Then, I opened my safe. A small, fireproof box under my desk. I took out the physical copy of my contract. I placed the printed logs on top of it. It was done. Legally, mathematically, and contractually, the intellectual property known as the Arcturus core logic no longer belonged to Arcturus Capital. It belonged to Naomi Adler. I felt a strange buzzing in my fingertips. It wasn't adrenaline, it was vindication. The next morning, the mood in the office was electric. Latency was down. The P&L was green. Bryce was strutting around the trading floor like he had personally invented money. "See, Naomi?" he sneered as he walked past my cubicle. "Trevor got it done. Sometimes you have to break a few rules to make an omelet." "You certainly broke something, Bryce," I said, offering him a tight, polite smile. "We're ready for the pitch," he announced to the room. "The Vantage Partners deal is a go." Ah, yes, the Vantage Partners deal. That was the ticking clock I hadn't mentioned yet. Bryce had been courting a massive institutional investor, Vantage Partners, for a $300 million capital injection. The entire pitch was based on the proprietary, unassailable advantage of the Arcturus technology. Bryce was going to sell them a stake in the engine. The engine he didn't own anymore. He was scheduling a due diligence meeting for next week. They would want to see the code architecture. They would want to see the IP assignment agreements. They would want to ensure that Arcturus actually owned the tech they were buying. I spent the rest of the day in a state of zen-like calm. I cleaned up my hard drive. I deleted personal files. I organized my documentation. At lunch, I went to the deli across the street and called my lawyer, a shark named Jessica, who made my old contract signer Henderson look like a golden retriever. It happened. I said into the phone, watching Bryce wave his arms through the glass window of the office building across the street. "You have the logs?" Jessica asked. Her voice was sharp, professional. "I have the logs, the contract, and the timestamp diffs. They bypassed the security kernel last night. And they didn't ask for consent. They demanded I give them keys. I refused, and they hacked their own system." "Beautiful," Jessica said, drafting the notice now. "When do you want to drop the hammer?" "Not yet," I said. "They have a pitch meeting with Vantage Partners next Wednesday. Let them dig the hole a little deeper. I want them to be standing at the altar before we object to the wedding." "Cold," Jessica laughed. "I love it. Hold tight. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Just be the ghost in the machine." I hung up and walked back into the building. The lobby felt different. The logo on the wall, Arcturus Capital, looked like a tombstone. I took the elevator up, listening to two junior analysts talking about how they were going to buy Porsches when the Vantage deal went through. "Bryce is a genius," one of them said. I suppressed a laugh so hard it hurt my ribs. I walked back to my desk, opened a new terminal window, and typed a single command: tar czvf source backup final tar gz/core/logic. I was packing my bags, but I wasn't taking my clothes. I was taking the house. Corporate collapse is rarely a sudden event. It has a sound. It's the sound of whispered conversations in hallways and the sudden shutting of laptop lids when someone walks by. By Monday, the whispers had started. Mark, a mid-level compliance officer with perpetually tired eyes and a hairline that was retreating in surrender, stopped by my desk. Mark was one of the few people at Arcturus who actually read the regulations. He was also the only one who seemed to notice that while the P&L was up, the risk reports were looking weird. "Naomi," he said, leaning against the fabric wall of my cubicle. He held a paper cup of tea like it was a source of warmth in a blizzard. "Can I ask you a hypothetical?" "I love hypotheticals, Mark. They're like lies, but with plausible deniability." He didn't smile. "If, hypothetically, the system flagged a critical security exception in the audit log, but the ticket was marked as resolved by an admin override. That would be a problem for the SOC2 audit, right?" He knew, or at least he suspected. I swiveled my chair to face him. "Mark, if the security exception was a bypass of the core kernel, it's not just a SOC2 problem. It's an existential problem." "Trevor says it's a feature," Mark sighed. "He says the new architecture requires open permissions to function. But I'm looking at the IP agreements for the Vantage deal. The warranty clause says we certify that our security meets industry standards. If we bypassed our own firewalls, then we're lying to the investors." I finished for him. Mark rubbed his face. "I tried to tell Bryce. He told me to stop being a bureaucratic buzzkill. He said the tech is proprietary, so we set the standards." I looked at Mark. He was a good guy. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage. Mark, I said quietly. Do you have access to the original employment contracts? From 5 years ago? Yeah, in the archives. Why? Go read Appendix D of my original architect agreement. Just read it. Don't tell anyone you read it. Just file it away in your brain. Mark frowned, confusion crinkling his forehead. Appendix D, Naomi, what's going on? Just read it, Mark. Maybe update your LinkedIn profile. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly and walked away. I had just handed him a life raft. Whether he used it was up to him. Meanwhile, the circus was in full swing. Bryce was in deal mode. The conference room was being prepped for the Vantage Partners meeting. They had catered expensive lunches. They had printed glossy brochures with diagrams of my algorithm, diagrams that were now technically inaccurate because of Trevor's butchery. I walked past the conference room and saw Bryce rehearsing his pitch to the mirror. We possess the most advanced, proprietary algorithmic engine on the street, he practiced, gesturing with a gold pen, owned wholly and exclusively by Arcturus. I stopped. I couldn't help myself. I leaned into the doorway. You might want to check the definitions of wholly and exclusively, Bryce, I said. He spun around. Annoyed, Naomi, I'm busy. Unless you're here to apologize for being a roadblock, get lost. I'm just admiring the confidence, I said. It takes a lot of guts to sell something you haven't stress tested. The system is fine. Profits are up 12% since Friday. He adjusted his tie. You're just jealous because Trevor fixed in a week what you sat on for years. You're obsolete, Naomi. After this deal closes, well, let's just say we'll be reassessing the headcount. He was firing me. He was going to wait until the check cleared and then he was going to fire me. Good luck with the pitch, Bryce, I said. Make sure you spell everything correctly, especially the names on the deeds. I went back to my desk. Mark was walking out of the archives room down the hall. He looked pale, like seen a ghost pale. He caught my eye from across the bullpen. He didn't wave. He just looked at me with a mixture of horror and awe. He had read Appendix D. He immediately went to his desk, opened his laptop, and started typing furiously. I suspected he was drafting a CYA, cover your ass memo to the general counsel, or perhaps his resignation letter. The trap was set. The bait was taken. The prey was currently admiring his reflection in the mirror, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath him was rigged with explosives. Wednesday morning arrived with the heavy, humid atmosphere of a thunderstorm waiting to break. Vantage Partners team was due at 1:00 p.m. At 9:00 a.m., I initiated the escrow protocol. I sat at my desk, which was now completely bare except for my monitor and a single heavy-duty encrypted USB drive, the iron key kind that self-destructs if you guess the password wrong 10 times. I wasn't stealing data. That's illegal. I was taking possession of my property. I ran the final script. It bundled the original, uncorrupted source code, the version before Trevor's optimization, and moved it to the external drive. Then, per the terms of Appendix D, it initiated a wipe of the local copies of the core architecture on my dev machine. I wasn't wiping the server, that would be sabotage. I was simply removing my personal property from my workspace. Transfer complete. I pulled the USB drive out. It felt heavy in my hand, cold metal. I put it in my blazer pocket. At 10:30 a.m., my lawyer, Jessica, sent the email. It was addressed to the General Counsel of Arcturus, with a CC to Bryce Langford Jr. The subject line was innocuous. Notice of IP reversion Adler Employment Agreement. The body of the email was less innocuous. It stated that due to the material breach of the fundamental security protocols logged on October 14th, ownership of the source logic described in Appendix D had automatically reverted to Naomi Adler. It demanded that Arcturus immediately cease all commercial use of the software and requested a meeting to discuss licensing terms. I waited. It takes time for emails to filter through the corporate digestion system. First, the general counsel would read it and laugh. Then he would read it again and frown. Then he would look up the contract. Then he would choke on his coffee. At 11:15 a.m., the door to the executive suite slammed open. I didn't see it, but I heard it. Bryce's voice boomed across the floor. Where is she? I didn't move. I was sipping tea. Bryce stomped over to my cubicle, followed closely by the general counsel, a sweaty man named Peters, and Trevor, who looked confused. What is this? Bryce waved a printed copy of the email in my face. Is this a joke? You're trying to blackmail us on the day of the deal. It's not blackmail, Bryce, I said calmly. It's contract law. You broke the seal, you bought the product. We own everything you wrote. Peters, the lawyer, sputtered, work for hire, standard practice. Not this, I said, Appendix D. If security protocols are altered without consent. Did you alter them, Trevor? Trevor looked at Bryce. We optimized them. You bypassed them, I corrected. Unauthorized modification. The clause triggered. The code is mine. This is bullshit. Bryce screamed, I'll sue you into the ground. I'll have security drag you out of here. You can do that, I said, but Vantage Partners is arriving in 2 hours, and I bet their due diligence team is going to ask for code audit. They're going to ask for the chain of title for the IP. If you kick me out, who explains to them why there's a massive legal dispute over the very asset they're buying? Bryce froze. The blood drained from his face. He realized the leverage. He couldn't disclose the dispute without killing the deal. But he couldn't close the deal if he didn't own the tech. What do you want? Bryce hissed. Money? A raise? I want to sit in on the meeting, I said. What? The board meeting with Vantage. I want to be there. Why? To ensure that my intellectual property is represented accurately. You are not coming into that room, Bryce spat. You're staying here. Peters, fix this. Get an injunction. Whatever. He stormed off. He was in denial. He thought he could bluff his way through the meeting. He thought he could just not mention the email. But he forgot about the third party. At 12 p.m., an email arrived from the Vantage legal team. They had done a preliminary scan of the public repo activity. Trevor had foolishly pushed some commits to a public GitHub for a library update. They noticed the admin override flags. Subject, urgent due diligence query to Bryce Langford Jr. We noticed some irregularities in the security architecture logs. Before we sign, we require a full walkthrough of the current IP ownership and security stack. We need your lead architect to verify the integrity of the code. Bryce read the email on his phone in the middle of the hallway. I saw his shoulders slump. He couldn't do the meeting without me. Trevor couldn't explain the code because Trevor didn't understand it, and if they lied, it was fraud. At 12:45 p.m., 50 minutes before the investors arrived, Bryce's assistant appeared at my desk again. She looked terrified. Mr. Langford, requests your presence in the boardroom. I stood up. I smoothed my blazer. I tapped the USB drive in my pocket. Lead the way. The boardroom at Arcturus was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, a table made of wood from some endangered rainforest, and chairs that cost more than a Honda Civic. Today, however, it felt like a courtroom where everyone was guilty except me. Vantage Partners had sent 3 people. The lead guy, Sterling, was a silver fox with eyes like a raptor. He didn't look like he bought vibes. He bought math. I took a seat at the far end of the table, away from Bryce and Trevor. Bryce shot me a look that promised murder. I gave him a look that promised litigation. So Sterling started opening a sleek leather folder. We've reviewed the numbers. Impressive returns over the last week. A bit volatile, but impressive. We've unlocked significant velocity, Bryce said, using his smooth sales voice, but I could see a bead of sweat tracking down his temple. Our new optimization strategy is paying dividends. Right, Sterling said. We have questions about the sustainability of this optimization. Our tech analysts noted that you've disabled several layers of the risk management stack. Bryce laughed nervously. Standard refactoring. We're streamlining. Streamlining usually implies making things more efficient, not less secure, Sterling said dryly. He turned his gaze to me. You must be Naomi Adler, the architect. I am, I said. We've heard good things. Your reputation precedes you, Sterling said. Can you walk us through the current state of the IP? Specifically, we want to know about the stability of the core logic with these new changes. The room went silent. Bryce held his breath. Trevor was staring at his shoes. The core logic, I began, my voice clear and steady, is extremely stable. It's a robust, low-latency engine designed for long-term viability. Bryce exhaled. He thought I was playing along. However, I continued. The current implementation running on the servers, the one with the security bypass, is a deviation from the certified architecture. Deviation? Sterling raised an eyebrow. Yes, it's a fork, an unauthorized fork. Bryce interrupted loudly. It's an update, an internal update. Naomi is just protective of her legacy code. Sterling ignored him. He was looking at me. When you say unauthorized, Miss Adler, do you mean unauthorized by the frantic nature of the market, or unauthorized by protocol? I mean unauthorized by the owner of the code, I said. The heir left the room. The owner? Sterling asked slowly. Arcturus Capital owns the code. I didn't say anything, I just looked at Bryce. Bryce? Sterling asked. Of course we own it. Bryce shouted, standing up. She's a disgruntled employee. She's trying to sabotage the deal. I'm not disgruntled, I said. I'm contractual. Mark, the compliance officer, was sitting in the corner taking minutes. He stopped typing. He slowly reached into his bag and pulled out his laptop. He opened it. Mark, Bryce snapped, put that away. Actually, Mark said, his voice shaking but audible. I think you should see this. Mark slid his laptop toward Sterling. On the screen was the scanned copy of Appendix D, highlighted in yellow. Sterling put on a pair of reading glasses. He read the clause. He read it again. He looked at the date on the document, and he looked at the date on the security logs Mark had helpfully pulled up in the next tab. Oct 14th, Sterling read. Security Protocol 4 bypassed. User Trevor, he looked up at Bryce. The look wasn't angry, it was disappointed, which is worse in business. Bryce, did you alter the fundamental security protocols without Miss Adler's consent? It's just legal gobbledygook. Bryce yelled. It doesn't mean anything. We paid her salary, we own the work. That's not what this says, Sterling said, tapping the screen. This says that as of October 14th, the IP reverted to the author, which means... He turned to me, Miss Adler. Do you currently hold the rights to the engine we are proposing to invest in? I do, I said. And do you have a licensing agreement with Arcturus Capital? I do not. Sterling closed the leather folder. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Well, Sterling said, that complicates the valuation. Bryce looked like he was going to stroke out. His face was a map of panic. You can't listen to her. She's bluffing. The code is on our servers, is it? I asked. I reached into my pocket. I placed the USB drive on the polished mahogany table. It made a small, distinct clack sound. The code on your servers, I said to Bryce, is the corrupted version. The one Trevor broke. The one that is currently running without safety rails. It works for now, sure. But it's leaking data, and it's legally compromised. I pointed to the USB drive. This drive contains the last valid, secure, and legally pristine version of the Arcturus engine. The version that generated the 18% returns you pitched to Vantage. And per my contract, this code, the source logic, belongs to me. The room was frozen. It was a tableau of corporate horror. Sterling looked at the USB drive, then at Bryce. Is she telling the truth, Bryce? Does she have the source? It doesn't matter. Bryce screamed. He was losing it. The veneer of the cool hedge fund manager had cracked, revealing the spoiled child underneath. She stole it. That's theft. It's her possession, I said coolly. I left the corrupted version for you. You can keep Trevor's code. Good luck with the SEC audit when they ask why you removed the compliance filters. Sterling stood up. His two associates stood up with him. They moved in perfect unison, like a singular entity of rejection. Bryce, Sterling said, we can't proceed with this. The IP ownership is in dispute, the security architecture is compromised, and frankly, your risk management appears to be non-existent. Wait, Bryce scrambled around the table. We can fix it, we can. We can sue her, we can get an injunction. I'm not investing $300 million into a lawsuit, Sterling said. I came to buy a Ferrari. You're trying to sell me a stolen car with cut brakes. Sterling turned to me. He nodded, a small mark of respect, Miss Adler. If you ever decide to license your technology to a firm that reads its contracts, give me a call. I will, I said. Sterling and his team walked out. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a submarine. Bryce stood facing the door, his back to me. His shoulders were heaving. Trevor was slumped in his chair, looking like he wished he could dissolve into the upholstery. Peters, the general counsel, was massaging his temples, realizing his career at this firm was effectively over. Then Bryce turned around. His face was twisted into a rictus of pure impotent rage. You, he whispered, you bitch. I'm a professional, Bryce, I said, standing up. There's a difference. I'll destroy you, he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. I'll bury you in legal fees. You'll never work on the street again. No, you won't, Peters said from the side of the table. Bryce whipped his head around. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of the law, Peters said wearily. She has us, Bryce, dead to rights. Appendix D is clear. If we sue, we lose. And in discovery, all the logs of Trevor bypassing the security will become public record. The SEC will shut us down. The investors will flee. It's over. Bryce looked at Peters, then at Trevor, then at me. The reality was crashing down on him. Money was gone. The reputation was gone. The toy he had tried to break was gone. He looked at the USB drive on the table. He lunged for it. I didn't flinch. I let him grab it. He held it up like a trophy. I have it. I have the code. That's encrypted, I said. AES 256. Without the key phrase, it's just a piece of metal, and you can't brute force it. I wrote the encryption. He stared at the drive. He looked like he wanted to crush it. He knew it was the only leverage he had left, and he couldn't even use it. What do you want? He choked out. Just tell me what you want. I picked up my purse. I looked around the boardroom one last time. I want you to admit it, I said. Admit what? Bryce rasped. Admit that you didn't know what you were doing. Admit that you tried to break something you didn't understand because your ego couldn't handle that you didn't build it. Bryce stared at me. His face was purple. The veins in his neck were bulging. For a second, I thought he might actually attack me. But Bryce was a coward. Cowards don't throw punches, they throw tantrums. I own you, he screamed. The sound echoed off the glass walls. I own you and your algorithms. I am Arcturus. It was the scream of a king who had just realized his throne was made of cardboard. I stood there, smoothing my jacket, watching him unravel. It was pathetic. It was glorious. You don't own me, Bryce, I said softly. And as of yesterday, you don't even own the algorithms. You own a shell company with a high burn rate and a compromised server. I walked over to the table and held out my hand. The drive, please. He clutched it tight. No, okay, I shrugged. Keep it, it's useless. I have the backup, and I have the key, and I have the contract. I turned to the general counsel. Peters, have your office contact my lawyer. We can discuss a transition plan. I'm willing to license the engine back to Arcturus, but the rates have gone up significantly, and it comes with a condition. What condition? Peters asked, looking like he just wanted to go home and drink scotch. Bryce steps down as CEO, and Trevor is terminated immediately. For cause, you can't do that. Bryce yelled. I'm the IP holder, I said. I can dictate the terms of the license. If you want the engine that makes the money, you play by my rules. If not, well, I hear Vantage Partners is looking for new tech partner. I have Sterling's card. I walked out of the boardroom. I didn't look back. I heard Bryce screaming something about loyalty and betrayal, but it sounded distant, like a dog barking 3 streets over. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked out into the sunshine. It was a crisp fall day in Chicago. The air smelled like exhaust and potential. I checked my phone, a text from Mark. He's crying. Literally crying. Peters is drafting the termination letter for Trevor. Can I use you as a reference? I typed back, absolutely, call me tomorrow. I didn't destroy Arcturus. I saved the part that mattered, the code, and let the rot cut itself out. In the end, they accepted the deal. Bryce was moved to a non-executive chairman role, basically paid to stay away. Trevor was fired. I consulted for the firm at a rate of $800 an hour to fix the mess they made, but I never gave them the source code back. We signed a licensing agreement. I own the engine, they just rent the horsepower. I walked to the nearest bar, ordered a double bourbon, and sat by the window. I watched the people rushing by, chasing money, chasing status. I took a sip of the drink. It burned, hot and clean. They tried to rewrite the rules. They forgot that I wrote the game. So, that's how I dismantled a hedge fund with a contract clause and a USB drive. If you learned something about reading the fine print, or just enjoyed watching a rich kid hit a wall at 100 mph, drop a comment. I'll be here, sipping my bourbon, writing code that belongs to me. Real power doesn't announce itself, it simply asserts. Naomi quietly placed that USB key, letting her meticulous contract speak for itself. True authority comes from earned expertise, not just a title. Always know your worth. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story.